A final point on how this model would work is that in the Vedas, teleological considerations, or in other words, considerations of achieving goals, are built in, if I understand them rightly, that each statement of the Veda will sort of contain the knowledge that's relevant plus also the purpose of that statement. And so if the oscillations present in the absolute are going to give rise to forms of activity at a later stage, one can say that if the oscillations in the absolute give rise to activities which lead to some particular goal being generated, then those systems in the relative which are driven by the same oscillations will also be capable of achieving goals. And
that's a great philosophy of yajnas. How the yajnas produce the effects. This is how it is understood from physics. Go ahead, it's very valuable.
In fact, I think it must go the other way around. In fact, that the understanding that Maharishi has talked about must be incorporated into the physics, because it's would obviously be a difficult job to derive evolution from just the things I've been saying about in this lecture. But if on the other hand all the steps are in the Vedas, then one would have something to go on in constructing a full physical theory. So after all, in physics, if one has a phenomenon like superconductivity to explain, to go straight from basic equations to superconductivity is quite difficult and wasn't done. But when people knew the various steps from experiments, eventually a theory of superconductivity was produced. So if the Vedas can tell us something about the steps by which the absolute gets connected with phenomena we observe today, that will be a considerable help.
I think that is that sound, the sound, and then speech, and that prescribing actions to produce predictable results. Fluctuations on the level of consciousness, and there is a system of fluctuation, and it's all mathematical. They have those meters and how many words and all that. So it's a mathematical structure. The hymn is a mathematical structure, its flow, and when that cognition was experienced, with that came the sound of it. And that sound came through speech. So as the seer cognized the hymn, he spoke it out loud. The fluctuation of consciousness crept into speech. And once it's speech, then formulating that speech on the level of its meaning for specific performances gave the methodology for predictable results. That's how the yajnas came about. So the medium is speech. Through the medium of speech, the transcendental speech, which is the fluctuations of the absolute, fluctuations of consciousness, this cognition, specific cognitions, that on the level of consciousness, flowing, gave rise to speech. So sound would be the medium. Sound properly appearing in its meaningful value becomes a speech. So cognition, whereas it was the fluctuation of consciousness, it was accompanied with sound value. And that sound, the seers perfected, memorized and passed on to generations. So through the medium of speech, the absolute flows out. That is why speech in the Vedas has been addressed as the mother of the Veda, because it is that which gives rise to the Veda and maintains its status quo. Speech is very highly important in the field of Veda. So sound was the first expression of the Absolute, along with the fluctuation of consciousness, which may be said to be belonging to light as well. That's how the Absolute seems to be propagating itself, self-perpetuating value of the Absolute. That's why these hymns, this Veda, is said to be eternal. It's undying, it's non-changing, because it's a fluctuation of Absolute. And the sound value then remains obscure in this state of non-fluctuating Absolute. But when the Absolute fluctuates, the speech comes out. That's how we look at the phenomenon of cognition, which is traditionally held to be eternal, non-changing. It's an absolute thing, and that is why the supreme authenticity belongs to the Vedas. That the meaning and the sound of it, sound and meaning, name and form, are absolutely intimate there. Name and form relationship is absolute there. No mistake there. Just the truth. That's why it's upheld as the ultimate authority. And on that basis, results could be predictable. What would happen if one does like that, like that, like that? What would happen if one does like that, like that, like that? That's how came the performances of different rites in order to bring about specific results. Another thing about the Vedas which is traditionally upheld is that they are not created. There is no one who created the Vedas. They are self-expressed. That's why we hold them to be the fluctuations of the Absolute. No operator is there to work it out. It appears on its own. That's why it's the fluctuation of pure Absolute. And in that is its authenticity, in that is its eternity, and in that is its non-creative value. It's uncreated, not created by anyone. It's a spontaneous fluctuation of the Absolute.